I'm so excited to share today's interview. Man, he's had 11 top 40 hits. He's sold over 55 million albums and one of only a few artists in history with a top 50 album for 6 consecutive decades. That's staying power. But even more important, today's guest is a rock pioneer who's helped build and shape, some of the most important musical genres and movements of our lifetime and beyond. Like shock rock, which he's kind of the king of that movement, right? But also punk rock. Johnny Rotten's tryout that got him the job as the singer of the Sex Pistols was Alice Cooper's song, I'm 18. And actually, the first song that Joey Ramone wrote for the Ramones was based on the chords of that same song, 18. Some people say I'm 18. That's what the song's called, but it's 18. The seeds of punk rock, they came from Alice. And of course, hard rock and metal owe a debt of gratitude to Mr. Cooper as well. I mean, Kiss begged, borrowed, and stole from Alice, even they admit it, amongst many, many others. And what other living rock star was beloved by Groucho Marx, Elvis Presley, Mae West, and Salvador Dali, or was called an overlooked songwriter, a great songwriter by Bob Dylan, or had a comic book series created about him by Neal Gaiman? He waged one of the greatest comebacks in rock history in 1989 with Poison. This was after critics said he was done. And then he won the heart of a whole new generation in Wayne's World.
We're not worthy! We're not worthy! We're not worthy!
We cover all of this today and get the real story behind the Chicken and many other urban legends that have become just legendary. You'll get some surprises along the way. Really, some of the best stories I've ever heard are in this interview. I'm recording this intro. I'm actually going in for surgery in just a few hours. Hoping this isn't my final interview, but if it is, I'd take it. Here's Alice.
Alice, great to be here with you.
Yeah, this is great. I used to live at Lake Point Towers.
Yeah, you were saying that.
You can see it from my hotel over there in 1983. I was in an elevator one time, and this young kid comes in, and he says, hey, man, Alice Cooper, man, that's great. I'm making a movie here. And I said, really? What's it called? He says, Risky Business. He says, Tom Cruise was about that big then,
Wow.
I said, well, good luck. Careful of Scientology, but good luck.
I love it. I want to go back to the very beginning and ask you, what was it for you, Alice, whether it was a song that you heard, person in your life, something that you saw that kicked open the door to your mind and made you want to pursue music, where you knew that's what you had to do?
Like any other kid at 15, I was exactly the right age when Beatlemania happened. I was painting a house, and my radio was always on. It was always on. And all of a sudden I hear, she loves you, yeah, yeah, yeah. And I went, what was that? Because it was different than anything else on the radio. We were used to the Beach Boys and the Four Seasons and Motown, And then about an hour later I heard, I wanna hold your hand. And I went, what is this? Because musically it was so different from anything else. And then I saw them, they had the hair and the whole thing, and immediately went, I gotta do this. This is what I wanna do,
Yeah.
And it just so happened that I was on the cross country and track team, was a miler and a 2-miler. My bass player, Dennis Dunaway, our drummer, John Spears. Half the team were jocks. We were all 4-year lettermen. And we couldn't let anybody know that because we were rockers. So we were leading 2 lives, But I mean, that's really what it was. We just started out playing parties and never had any idea 60 years later to still be doing this.
Your first band was the Earwigs, right?
The Earwigs. We did everything we could. We had Beatle wigs on and on our track outfits, Hired the girls to scream in the cafeteria. And in that moment, I went, I really want to do this.
Yeah.
And those guys were the original band.
Formed the Spiders, and then Don't Blow Your Mind became a #1 hit locally.
Blow your mind away.
The Nas was Nas.
We were the Nas,
yeah.
and then we found out that Todd Rundgren had a band called the Nas.
Yeah.
So I said, everybody was coming up with different names, horrific names. I think Dennis Dunaway said, the Husky Baby Sandwich. I went, okay. I said, I'm trying to picture that on I said, what if we went the other way? And I was thinking Betty Crocker, something Americana.
Yeah.
You know, and I said Alice Cooper because it sounded like a great grandmother name, you know, and they get that name, but they get us. We were by far the most notorious band in LA.
One of the things that you saw that people were not taking advantage of the exploitation of showmanship, and that was something that you knew.
You know, I all the great British bands coming over, and the songs were so, to me, very theatrical songs.
Yeah.
The Yardbirds especially, and the Kinks and the Who. And I kept saying there's an incredible backdrop with nothing happening, except maybe, you know, they might have the liquid light show. I said, but why not make the lyrics come to life?
Yeah.
If you're going to say, welcome to my nightmare, give them the nightmare, you know?
Welcome to my nightmare, yeah.
And really nobody had done it. And I went, you know, rock and roll was full of Peter Pans and no Captain Hook. And I went, well, I'll gladly be Captain Hook. You know, as long as the music is there, as long as, you know, 90% of Alice Cooper is the songs. 10% is the theatrics. You know?
Yeah.
So I mean, if you don't have the songs, you're just a puppet show up there. So we worked harder on the songs than anything else.
Tell me about meeting Shep Gordon and Frank Zappa and that whole thing.
Well, I can say this now because it's, you know, 1968 back then. We were so poor in LA that we were living in the Chambers Brothers basement in Watts during the riots. And Jimi Hendrix used to come over to the Chambers Brothers, and they'd all smoke grass together, you know, and we'd come out of the cellar like rats and do that. Jimi Hendrix was buying his grass from Shep Gordon, my manager, who at the time was just this New York kid that was, you know, selling grass to all these people at the Landmark Hotel. And Jimmy says, you know, they're going to bust you, man. He says, you're a young guy, you've got a lot of money, and you don't have an occupation. He said, I know a band that needs a manager. You should be a manager. Okay. So he brings us over. I opened the door, and I thought there was a smoke machine inside, you know. Walked through like this, and there's Jimmy, Jim Morrison, Janis Joplin. They're all sitting there getting high, you know.
27 Club.
And Shep hands me a handful of marijuana. And this is when marijuana was really illegal in LA. And I went, it's our manager. The very next day, we were supposed to sign with Frank Zappa. We didn't have a manager. And we walked in, and Shep walks in, and they said, who's he? And I said, oh, that's our manager. You didn't have a manager yesterday. I said, yeah, we got him last night. So Shep and I have been together 55 years. We don't have a contract. We don't have any contract at all. It just, you know, it was just all done on, you take care of that, I'll take care of this.
Wow. Everybody knows the infamous chicken incident, but what I want to point out here is what Frank Zappa said to you when you talked to him on the phone the next day, because you threw a chicken out into the front row.
Well, yeah, but it goes beyond that.
Yeah.
We're playing at the Toronto Peace Festival, and we're going to go on between the Doors and John and Yoko's first performance. We get in the middle of it, and we're playing, and we open up these feather pillows, hit it with a CO2 cartridge and a strobe light. And both bands on each side were going, yeah, this is great. And they're like this. And I look down, and there's a chicken. No, I didn't bring the chicken. I mean, I can see a guy in the audience going, see, I got my wallet, my tickets, my chicken. Yeah, let's go. And so I'm looking down, and there's the chicken. And I thought, well, I'm from Detroit. I've never been on a farm in my life. It has feathers. It has wings. It should fly. I picked it up, and I tossed it in the audience, thinking it would just, you know, somebody would get it, take it home, call it Alice, you know. The audience tore it to pieces, to my surprise, and threw all the parts up on the stage. Now, the next day, Alice Cooper kills chicken on stage. And Frank Zappa calls up and he goes, "Did you kill a chicken on stage last night?" And I went, "No." And he says, "Well, don't tell anybody. They love it."
Yeah, don't tell me you didn't do it.
That's when I knew rock was looking for a villain. And here's the kicker to the story. And it's a little dark, but the first 5 rows were all in wheelchairs. They're the ones that killed the chicken. But I never said that. I went, "Yeah, you don't get on my stage without being a little dangerous." And that, Next thing I know, I'm in to this day, every city, get the ASPCA going. "Are you going to kill chickens on stage?" I'm, "No,
But with Ozzy's passing and Ace just a few weeks ago, it hit me the other night. I was thinking about this, that you guys really were the antithesis and reaction to the hippie peace and love movement. It was like, put a flower in your hair, that, and you guys drove a stake through the heart of that.
Yes.
And Ozzy was all about that too. He was like, I don't want, Black Sabbath with what they were doing.
Yeah.
And what you were doing and what Kiss was doing later was doing.
Yeah. Well, we never were hippies.
Yeah.
We were much more interested in Ferraris and switchblades and blondes. I never bought into the hippie thing. I just didn't. That wasn't us.
Yeah.
And we were the most dangerous band. Everybody in the band were sort of art majors.
Yeah.
So we saw rock and roll as, let's do rock and roll, but let's make something different out of it. And we were always naturally theatrical. It wasn't something we tried to do. There was always guillotines and electric chairs on stage and things like that. Yeah. I think we didn't mind letting old horror movies slip in, or even James Bond themes, or West Side Story, things like that. We allowed into the show and into the music, and that's what made it so different.
Yeah.
We played a thing called the Lenny Bruce's birthday party at the Cheetah Club in LA. It's about 3,000 people there. The Doors played, the Jefferson Air played, and everything. And we came on last. And everybody's on acid, and they're all like this. And all of a sudden, uplighting. And we look like the clowns from outer space, right? And we cleared that room in 3 songs. I mean, literally, they were running for the doors. We were a bad vibe. The only people left were the GTOs and a couple of other people, and that's how we got with Zappa.
Yeah.
She says, "I saw this band last night that cleared 3,000 rooms out in 3 songs." He said, "I got to have them."
You brought metal and hard rock to the children, man.
Well, that was just how we played.
Yeah.
We wanted to be America's Yardbirds, except even a little bit more theatrical than that. They were our favorite band. And that's just how we naturally played.
I want to ask you about I'm 18, because Warner made you produce a 4-song demo, brought it to Jack Richardson, Uber producer. He dispatched it to a young guy named Bob Ezrin.
Yeah.
I'm 18 was the standout track of that demo. And it was something that it became an anthem, because kids, couldn't drink, and there was about a frustrated teenager. They could go off and fight war, but they couldn't vote. They couldn't drink at that age. And you brought that out, and then the next year they did pass the voting where you could vote at 18.
Well, it was an interesting time, because Vietnam was going on and the whole thing was like this. We were not politically involved at all. I hated politics. To this day, you'll never see politics. We made fun of election. With "I want to be elected." But I hate politics. But the band first heard "My Generation" by The Who, and we stopped the car and went, "What was that?" That was an anthem. Because 100 years from now, a 16-year-old kid will hear that song and go, "That's me." They identify with that song, what that song said. When we did 18, it was one of those things where we just went, okay, it was a jam. First of all, Bob Ezrin was sent to fire us. Jack Richardson didn't want anything to do with us at all. Canadian guy, and he's going, I don't want to get that. So he sent Bob to come and see us at Max's Kansas City. We were going to play live there. Bob comes in, sits down, and when he went back to Toronto, and he says, I know I'm fired. He says, but I hired them. I signed them. And Jack Richardson said, well, your punishment is you have to produce them. Love It to Death, Killer, School's Out, Billion Dollar Babies. Bob was the only guy we would listen to. And he took a song that was that long, made it into this long, and he kept saying, dumb it down. Dumb it down. We had all these guitars going, and he goes, no, dumb it down.
Add a piano to the bass line.
Yeah, he says, put a oboe under the bass or whatever. And we used to go, what are you talking about? But when you heard it, it was dum, 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 dum. It was so basic. And what the guy was saying was, I'm 18, I'm frustrated, I can't. And I like it. That was the catch line right there. I'm 18 and I like it. So there it was on the charts on CKLW, which was the biggest surprise to us, because it didn't fit on the top 40.
Right.
But it was the first punk anthem. And I didn't even understand how it fit on the top 40. But it did. So we were at the right place, right time with the right thing.
I mean, it's got to feel great to know that Johnny Lydon, that's how he tried out for the Sex Pistols.
They did.
It was the only song in the jukebox that he could stand, he said. When
that was they were busking, in the subways doing I Love the Dead, all these horrific Alice Cooper songs.
Yeah.
That's, normally they're doing some happy song. They're doing all these really dark anthems.
Then he also answered it with his song 17, which was on Nevermind the Bollocks.
Yeah. I totally got the Sex Pistols. They did exactly what we did, only how smart is this? You've got the Sex Pistols, a punk band, and where do they start playing in America? Texas. Texas cowboy bars, where every day there's going to be a story.
Yeah.
That was so smart. Don't take them to New York or LA, take them to where they don't belong.
Yeah.
The Bible Belt.
Right.
And every day in the paper, there was some story about it. Was brilliant, really.
And Joey Ramone, the first song he wrote, the Ramones, was based on those chords. I'm 18 was confusing, too, because the single was called 18.
Yeah.
But it was called I'm 18, and still people either call it one or the other.
Yeah, it's 18.
So 1972, huge year for you. The song is played every year around the same time.
Oh, yeah.
Greatest 2 words that a teenager's ever heard.
Yeah.
The national anthem of teenagers, School's Out.
To this day. I get emails from India and Russia going, last day of school, man, they're playing School's Out.
Came from the Bowery Boys, is what I read. You saw that on TV, and one of the guys had said something similar. Tell me about that.
We always had TV was always on. And we were very devotees of old movies and everything like that. And we're working on a song, and the Bowery Boys are on. Now, I don't know if anybody know who the Bowery Boys are, but there was a whole series of Bowery Boys movies where they were these kids, from New York, and they were always, in haunted houses and things like that. And there was a character named Muggsy and Satch.
Yeah.
And at one point, Satch says something, and Muggsy takes his hat off and he goes, "School's out," which meant wise up in that 40s lingo. And I went, what? I got it as wise up. School's out. I know there was another song, School is Out, that was in the 60s, early or late 50s. But I said, no, wait, that's an anthem.
Yeah.
And we wrote that in about 15 minutes. Yeah. Because the best songs are always written in 10, 15 minutes.
That's true.
Yeah. Yeah.
Includes a version of the West Side Story, jet song riff and gang vocals.
You're always well respected. You're never alone.
What inspired that? What did the band think when you brought that?
Yeah, you know, it was just, we grew up with that.
Yeah.
You know, and again, we didn't mind that seeping into our music. I think a lot of people in rock were trying to, no, we don't want that in, you know.
Yeah.
We let all of our influences happen. If we could do a little piece of jet song in a rock song, how cool was that?
Yeah.
Da 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 da. Yeah. Da 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 da. And everybody carried switchblades anyways. So when we did the show, we would actually do the fight scene. And there were real switchblades.
Yeah.
And everybody got cut every night. There was every little stitches, you know. But that's what made it so right. You know, people were just, what is that? You know, they've never seen anything like that. Actually bringing Broadway to rock.
Yeah.
You know, and, but on our terms.
Yeah.
You know, not making it sappy, but just let's use that. But let's make it work within the thing. I always tell new members in my band now, if they come in, I go, 3 things I guarantee you. You're going to see the world. You're going to get paid. You're going to get stitches. Everybody in my band's got stitches.
I love it. Well, Bob Ezrin put together the choir, and of course later he would do similar thing with Another Brick in the Wall, which you cover sometimes when you do the song a lot of times. But tell me about that, the idea to bring in a kids choir.
Bob Ezrin was brilliant.
Jeez.
Absolutely brilliant. He also worked with Kiss, Aerosmith, Pink Floyd. He did the Wall for Pink Floyd. You know, I mean, everybody, Peter Gabriel, everybody.
Yeah.
And he said, if you're going to do Schools Out, we have to have kids in it singing, because that's the whole object of it. This really hard song, but with these kids singing is great.
Yeah.
And we went, oh, good idea. You know, great idea. And then again, he used it again in We Don't Need No Education. Now, if you take Schools Out and that song, they go like this.
Yeah.
They fold right in. So at the end of Schools Out, we go into, you know, we don't need no education. We don't need no, you know, and they were both, you know, the same guy, same producer. It might have been the same kids. I don't even know.
Well, I just remember growing up, my dad had the record, and it's one of the most famous record packages ever, with the desk and the paper panties and the switchblade desk, the switchblade that came in and everything. It hit #1 in the UK, and I think you sent flowers to Mary Whitehouse. Tell us about that.
Well, Mary Whitehouse decided that we were the worst thing that could ever happen to the youth of Europe, or especially England. And of course, the album went right to #1. And we sold out every ticket at Wembley. Yeah. And they tried everything they could to ban us, but there was nothing to ban us about.
Yeah.
You know, we weren't really druggies. We drank beer. And there was nothing solid they could really ban us for. But every day in the London papers, it was the first thing. You know, worst character to ever. You can't buy that kind of publicity, you know. So I kept sending her flowers going, thank you. And there was another guy, Leo Absey, that was backing her up, you know. And we'd send him cigars and everything. Because you really couldn't buy that kind of publicity. It was so good. But now when you get there and you have sold out Wembley, you better pay it off.
Yeah.
In other words, you better bring it. And we did. We had the show. We had the music, the show, and everything. And I think it shocked everybody that we weren't just schlock, that the band was great.
Yeah.
You know, and that's we actually took off in London before we took off in America. You know, same with Jimi Hendrix. Everybody thought Jimi Hendrix was British. You know, he was from Seattle. You know, but he started in England and came to America. So a lot of Americans thought we were British. You know, we're from Arizona. You know.
Well, Hollywood Bowl the saga around the helicopter pilot that pulled the job of they call it the infamous panty drop, 18,000 pairs of paper underwear. And it ended up costing about $100,000. Tell us that story.
Well, first of all, if you're going to do schools out, if you were in 8th grade and it was Monday and you open up your desk and you could produce a pair of panties, you were the guy. So we said, well, let's, instead of putting a sleeve, let's make the album, put panties on the album, And you open up the album and there's a pair of panties and all this. So it was outrageous, but it was exactly our sense of humor.
Exactly. Yeah.
And it got all the publicity. By the way, now if you find those, they're worth about 10 grand. Because the original ones are, now are crazy.
Yeah.
How expensive they are. We're doing the Hollywood Bowl. There's a couple of great stories about the Hollywood Bowl. What should we do? We were real big on the Hollywood publicity stunt. We'll bring a helicopter in and we'll drop panties on the audience. Nobody else would do that. And so we did it. And I remember Elton and Bernie Taupin in the front row. Elton says he still has his.
I love it.
During rehearsal that day, this is Hollywood now, we had Wolfman Jack come out on a camel. It was about 90 degrees. The camel dumps on the stage.
Wow.
And a guy goes out to clean it up. They go, ah. The guy looks at it, he goes, that's special effects. He says, that's the wrong guy to go out and I'm going, what? But that show was infamous. That was the infamous show that kind of like really put us on the map.
The pilot flew too low.
Too low.
So
Lost his license.
He got arrested, spent a little bit of time in prison or jail, and it was like $100,000 the cost of all that, right?
Yeah. Again, that was important to do. We always realized we were probably going to do time. But was it worth it? Yeah. Because it would be a legendary thing. In London, after all of this bad publicity that we got in London, we decided, Avedon, I just did a photo shoot with Avedon, where I was laying on my side, totally naked except for a boa constrictor, right? And it was a really very cool shot.
Yeah.
They blew that up and they put it on a billboard and they put it on a truck. And we made sure that it stalled at Piccadilly Square on a Friday at rush hour. Front page of the paper.
Yeah.
And I just went, we are in such trouble. We're going to be in jail and everything like that. They loved it. The British loved the Hollywood publicity stunt because you had the nerve to actually do it.
Yeah.
And they just kind of, that was during Monty Python, so it was kind of something where they would expect Monty Python to do that, but it fit perfectly with the situation.
Well, and it paid off big time. In 1973, $1 Billion Babies went to #1 on the album charts.
Yeah.
You broke a U.S. tour record, box office record that the Rolling Stones held. And Welcome to My Nightmare. Let's talk about that. In 75, you turned the stage show built around the song with a concert movie and Vincent Price. Tell me how that came together.
Well, first of all, what happened was the original band, was together 7 years.
Yeah.
We made 4 huge albums and 2 albums that didn't make any sense, Pretty's for You and Easy Action. But those were Frank Zappa albums, and they weren't supposed to be commercial successes.
Yeah.
When we got Bob Ezra and everything went through the roof. And after 7 years, we never took time off. We just toured and toured. Back in those days, you made 2 albums a year. That was normal, because if you didn't, somebody behind you was going to take you out.
Yeah.
We had Bowie breathing down our neck. So, you're going to make 2 albums a year and then tour.
Yeah.
You're writing those songs while you're touring. You don't have time off. We've just burned out. The original band just burned out.
Yeah.
And we never left on any bad blood. We were all best friends. But the band just separated. We didn't divorce, we separated. And I had an idea for a thing called Welcome to My Nightmare. This would have been a Broadway show only on our terms.
Yeah.
Hard rock, nothing that would in the least bit be on Broadway, but
Yeah.
it would have all the Broadway to it. And Shep and I and Bob Ezrin put all of our money into it.
Yeah.
So if it failed, we were all broke, you know, and it worked. And so there's one song called "The Black Widow," and it's sort of a. The idea was it was going to be a museum of spiders, and we kept sitting around, and go, who's going to be the curator on this? Because Alice is going to be the victim, so we need a curator. Bela Lugosi's dead. Boris Karloff's dead. We kept going through all the names, and somebody said, "What about Vincent Price?" Oh, Al, no, he'll never do it. You know. We called him up. He answered the phone,
Yeah.
and he says, "I'll be right down." Vincent Price? Are you kidding? And he comes in and he reads it. He reads the piece, and he goes, "Can I rewrite some of it?" I went, "Rewrite all of it." You know, Vincent Price, and he loved it. He was the character. That voice, that great Vincent Price voice, was perfect.
These words he speaks are true. We're all humanary stew.
Then he says, "I understand you're going to do a video of this." Yeah. He says, "Can I be in it?" Yeah. So he's in the video.
I see you've come here for an education. Oh, that's very encouraging.
And this was when tape was this thick. It was the beginning of video.
Yeah.
There was no place to play it, really. There was nothing on TV where you could actually play this.
The Black Widow.
And then he says, "When does the first live shows happen?" And I said, we're going to open in Tahoe, just like off-Broadway kind of place. And he says, "Can I be in it?" I went, "Yeah." So we actually had Vincent Price on stage playing that character during the show. I mean, which one of the high points of my life is getting to work with him. And he was so great. He was just so much fun. It was exactly what I didn't expect from him. You know.
Again, ahead of your time with precursor to long form videos. Michael Jackson took a little line from the playbook.
I reminded Michael Jackson of that.
Did you?
We gave him his first platinum album, Michael.
Well, no more Mr. Nice Guy. There's a story that you wrote the lyrics to that out of anger over how your parents were treated by certain people in their social circle, the media, because of your public enema persona. How accurate is that interpretation?
My dad was a pastor. My granddad was an evangelist. My wife's father is a Baptist pastor. And I was the prodigal son.
Yeah.
But I did come back to the church. You know, the whole thing was, we were accused, every city we went into, there was no internet. So everybody created their own Alice stories. We'd get into town and they go, "All right, you're going to set fire to German shepherds tonight?" And I go, "I don't think so," you know. And the stories got bigger and more horrific as it went on. And my dad was pretty much paying the price for this.
Yeah.
I mean, he loved rock and roll. He was not a prude about it at all. He says, I love the music. I love your show. He's like, what I can't do is I can't abide by the lifestyle.
Yeah.
Because everybody was sleeping around. Everybody was, you know, smoking grass. And I get that. I get it. But I appreciate this. But him and my mom went through a lot of, you know, because I mean, people in church are hearing the same stories everybody else is, you know. But you know, they lived through it. And so my dad and I, and my mom and dad and I had really never ever a problem. There was never, and I never did have a problem with school or my parents.
Yeah.
And yet I wrote all these angst songs about it. You know, I mean, that was really it. So I said, after all this dastardly stuff that Alice Cooper had done, I said, "Okay, gloves are off. No more Mr. Nice Guy." And they went, "It gets worse?" That was the joke on it, was "No more Mr. Nice Guy." Yeah, it gets worse.
Well, speaking of that, many people have misinterpreted a lot of your music or used it as a weapon for their agenda, controversy. 2 examples of that are Only Women
Only Women
and
Bleed, yeah.
Cold Ethel.
Yeah.
You know,
Well,
we
Only
talked
Women
about that.
Bleed
Yeah.
was a part of the nightmare. The nightmare was this kid named Steven that couldn't wake up. The nightmare just kept going and going and going. He could hear his mother calling, but he couldn't wake up. And that would really be a nightmare for me, because the claustrophobia of being in a nightmare and not being able to get out of it. So that was easy to write then, everything that happened in that nightmare. And I wanted a ballet in Only Women Bleed. It was such a pretty song.
Only women bleed. Only women bleed.
And it was a woman's anthem. I mean, it was talking about women that were really being really hurt and abused. Of course, people took it a totally other way, and I got it. I knew that the controversy would be there.
Yeah.
But when they heard the lyrics, they went, oh, Tina Turner did it.
Yeah.
And she killed my version, because if she was an abused woman.
Only the women bleed.
So she really sang it
Yeah.
from that perspective. But the thing about that song was, I wanted to be sitting on a garbage can and a ballet going on behind me, a beautiful ballet. So we needed a ballerina. We had auditions in LA. 2,000 girls showed up. And one girl came out there and she did the whole thing, and the guy says, stop. First of all, our director for Nightmare was from West Side Story. And he says, you, here, 17-year-old girl, which ended up being my wife, Cheryl. I wasn't there. I didn't even meet her till rehearsal. And she was by far ahead of anybody else there on ballet, jazz, everything. And she ended up doing the ballet behind me, which was really beautiful. I mean, it was really a part of the nightmare that was actually really a beautiful moment. And then what would happen was, we'd do Cold Ethel.
I miss it's cold and a skeleton kiss.
Which I had a dark sense of humor, thinking that nobody would take necrophilia seriously, except for Ann Landers.
Yeah, call him this. You got
Yeah,
little...
Ann Landers decided that song was, she wrote a heated letter about it. And I read it and I went, wow. I wrote her back and I said, if there's a giant rash of necrophilia because of this song, I said, I will apologize, but get a sense of humor. It's part of a nightmare. And what would happen on stage was, I would have this dummy.
Yeah.
And it was Cold Ethel. And I would throw the dummy around, like an epichet, a French epichet, and end up throwing it on this bed. It was just, And then I would move over to this side of the stage. Well, when I moved over to this side of the stage, Cheryl would change with the dummy.
Yeah.
And then we'd come back, Only Women Bleed would start, and all of a sudden a leg would come up. And then she'd sit up, and everyone went, that dummy came to life. It was so easy. It was such a simple thing.
Yeah.
But it worked. It really worked. And that's how I met Cheryl. She's still in the show now. She still dances just as good as she did then.
About to celebrate 50 years.
Yeah, 50 years.
Gosh.
She can still outdance any 25-year-old. And she looks great, yeah.
I love it. Well, going into the 80s, you were really getting overtaken by addiction. You call interviews I've seen, you call the 80s albums your blackout albums.
Three albums I don't remember writing
Yeah.
or doing. I was in the great Los Angeles cocaine blizzard. Everybody I knew in LA was coke. It was sort of a natural, it was sort of just like smoking grass after a while. It was so normal. But
you have this amazing interview, though. That I would tell everybody to go watch it with Pastor Laurie.
Yeah.
And you talk about a moment in there that I think is so impactful for all people, especially young people, that you had a rock of cocaine, you had a gun, you were looking in the mirror. Tell us about that, where it all kind of came to a head.
Yeah, you get to a point where, first of all, everybody sniffed cocaine at that period in Los Angeles. It was sort of a normal thing. And if you lived in Beverly Hills, you could get away with anything. Nobody even cared. The police didn't care. And I finally got to a point where somebody came up to me and said, if you smoke it, it's non-addictive. It's like buttered popcorn. You can't stop it. So I got way, way, way into it. I was basically a drinker, but I got way into cocaine because I've got a very addictive personality.
Yeah.
And finally, I mean, it just got to a point where I was isolated, and it was just this rock of cocaine that I hadn't paid for yet. And everybody left. Shep left. Cheryl went to Chicago, not to divorce, but just to get out of there.
Yeah.
Until I got a hold of myself. And I finally got out of bed. I looked in the mirror, and I saw my eyes were bleeding. I think I was probably hallucinating, but it was my makeup. Only it was blood. And I went, okay. I took the rock, flushed it, and went to bed for 4 days.
Wow.
And when I woke up, I went, okay. I called Cheryl. I said, it's over. And she goes, yeah. Because,
Yeah.
you say that to anybody, and they're going to go, yeah, right. So it took me a good 2 years before I could really convince that I was sober. I was going to be sober. And, but it was really scary.
Doctors call it miraculous because you had cirrhosis of the liver and
Yeah. Well, I quit drinking also 42 years ago. Everything stopped. And I came out and people said, well, out of the hospital. I went through this insane, it wasn't really a hospital for stopping drinking. It was more of a very exclusive insane asylum in Upper New York. And I'll tell you one great story. There's an old guy in there, Joe. And it was all these people that had a lot of money that instead of going to jail, they went here, And I was the only one in there for alcohol. I started realizing these people were truly insane. And old Joseph was sitting there, and we're both in our robes, and I'm going to get released the next day. And he goes, Alice, he says, tomorrow, he says, you're going to get out of here. He says, and you're going to go, your wife is going to be waiting for you. Your kids are going to be waiting for you. You're going to get your career back. He says, and things are going to be great. And I said, well, thanks, Joseph. He says, and someday I'll get out of here. I said, yeah. And when I do, I'm going to kill you. I went, well, Joseph, I hope you never get out of here. But that's how crazy this place was.
yeah.
I wrote From the Inside with Bernie Taupin about all the characters in there.
Oh, man.
I couldn't wait. We're both lyricists. And I said, have I got a plethora of insanity to give? And so, we wrote that album together.
I'm stuck here on the inside looking out. I'm just
Yeah, I came out though, and I wasn't, people said, you're a cured alcoholic.
Yeah.
And I go, no, I'm a healed alcoholic. That's because you don't come out and just go, okay, everything's okay now. You're going to want to drink. I never once had a thought of having a drink after that or any drug.
Yeah.
And so, God just took it away from me. And that's how I look at it.
When you say healed, you're a great man of faith, and that's something that's lacking in today's world, that faith. But you believe that God took it away.
Absolutely.
And
there was no, even the doctor said, okay, that's a miracle. You should be hiding bottles all over the house, and you should be sneaking drugs.
Right.
And I went, I've got absolutely no desire. That would be like me taking arsenic. That appealed to me, and that just never happens. So it was truly a miracle.
Well, your big comeback, Poison. I was just talking to Desmond a couple weeks ago.
Oh.
Desmond Child, who of course has co-written so many great songs with Bon Jovi, Living on a Prayer, and You Give Love a Bad Name, and so many others. But tell me about that, because how that came together. It started out as a riff, part of a John Waite song, to a melody you and Desmond Child developed. Tell us about how Poison came.
It was interesting because this period of time was the Sunset Strip hair bands, spandex world. But every song was really well done.
Yeah.
And every video was really well done. I kept going, wow, this is really good. These bands suddenly went from being street waifs to being showbiz.
Yeah.
And wow, Bon Jovi, Motley Crue, so many bands, Cinderella, all these groups. And on top of it, they were really good musically.
Oh yeah.
So I'm going, wow, this is actually very interesting. Every song that I liked, I'd look and say, who wrote this? And Desmond Child's name was there. And I kept seeing this guy, Desmond. I said, okay, I got to meet this guy. So we met Desmond, and I said, Desmond, I love what you're doing with Bon Jovi. Songs are so hooky and so good. I said, I need it to be darker and sexier, but I want that element. I want your element. And the first song we wrote was Poison.
Your cruel device.
That was just, after that, we wrote a whole album together, and he produced it. And 2 or 3 hits off that album.
MTV, they were playing the video nonstop.
I got tired of hearing it. I never thought I'd ever say that, but I actually got tired of hearing Poison on the air.
Yeah.
And it was always behind Tom Waits' song. That one song of Tom Waits. But even to this day, when we start that song up.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Well, Cooper-loving parents were thrilled to see their kids discovering you. You know, it passed on to the next generation.
Yeah.
I mean, I remember that being an anthem when I was in, 8th grade.
Yeah. It was on the radio constantly, yeah.
It was, and then, of course, Feed My Frankenstein. I got to ask you about Wayne's World because, that's become a huge meme. We're not worthy,
We're not worthy! We're not worthy! We're not worthy!
Well, I watched Saturday Night Live because it was brilliant.
Yeah.
They had a great cast.
Yeah.
And that bit, the Wayne's World thing, was
Yeah.
really a funny bit. It was great. These kids in their basement. And I knew all those kids. Yeah. I knew every one of those kids.
Totally.
They were the ones that come to the show. And I got a call and they said, we're going to do a movie. Would you be in the movie? And that whole thing. I didn't know about the We're Not Worthy thing at all. And I was just supposed to do Feed My Frankenstein. And then they come backstage and the whole thing.
It's actually going to be Schools Out, but it changed.
Yeah, and then Feed My Frankenstein was a more current thing. And so Michael, I get backstage, we're going to do the song. And he goes, well, you're an actor. And I went, yeah, I've done some acting. And he says, you could do some lines then, right? And I go, well, yeah. Hands me about 5 pages of dialogue. And I said, when are we shooting this? And he goes, half an hour. Okay. So I'm reading it. I'm going, I can't memorize any of this. So I took the basic parts. Now I got Dana and Mike Myers here. And they're doing everything they can to make me laugh. So I pick a spot right between them. And I didn't know all the lines. I was just riffing.
Yeah.
I was just making things up and they're going, that's not the script. But it worked because of the juxtaposition that the band were like Jeopardy. Guys, isn't that an Algonquin word? Why, yes, it is.
Which is Algonquin for the good land.
I was not aware of that.
And that made it very funny. And then the We're Not Worthy thing, to this day, if I go to the airport 3 times, it'll be the We're Not Worthy, We're Not Worthy. And I try to pretend like it's the first time it's ever happened. And I go, oh, how clever.
Yes.
But Michael and Danny are still really good friends. And, they said, we could have stuck you with something much worse than that.
Oh, yeah.
If you would have seen the outtakes of We're Not Worthy, they went on for another 10 minutes. And it got vile. I mean, just vile.
Well, I love in the interviews I've heard you talk about how selling your albums in Christian bookstores, you got to be the only rock star, that's
Well, it was an interesting thing because I was Christian, very seriously Christian. But my pastor says, I told him, I said, I don't know if I can still be Alice Cooper. And he says, you think God makes mistakes? And I went, no. He says, look where he put you. He put you in the camp of the Philistines.
Yeah.
And I went, okay. He said, be Alice Cooper. But now have this knowledge of the Christianity. I said, okay. So I started writing albums, and they were all hard rock albums. The Last Temptation was sort of Something Wicked This Way Comes, only a point of view where a little kid is offered everything by this traveling show. And Neal Gaiman got involved, and we wrote the thing together. And the whole thing was about the fact that the kid did not have to buy into it at the end. After he was offered everything, he just said, no, I'm not interested.
Yeah.
You know, so the evil part of it just could not understand that. But the whole album was about that. And my record company couldn't understand why it was being sold in Christian bookstores. Because it was a hit album and a regular thing, but it also had that element of morality in it. You know, same thing with Brutal Planet.
Yeah.
Brutal Planet was the world going towards a brick wall at record speed. And once you hit there was no returning.
It's such a brutal planet.
So the next album, Dragon Town, was about what happens afterwards. And it was, you know, it was sort of a double album. And I didn't give up any of the rock and roll at all. I didn't give up any of the lyrics. It's just it had a different flavor now. And it appealed, I think, to more people.
Yeah.
You know, because now it was really, that album wasn't just an album, it was a story.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? The whole thing was a story. And it didn't get gooey. It didn't get overly anything, but it made the point.
Yeah.
You know, and those are two of my favorite albums that we do, you know.
Yeah. Well, there's so much redemption in your music. You know, it's, I think the overwhelming theme, if I look back on the music and the show and everything, it's about redemption, you know?
Alice was always the villain. I don't care what book you read. I don't care what movie you see or what play you go to see. The hero is only as good as the villain. When you see a James Bond, you want that guy to be just horrific because James going to get him in the end, right? Anything, any Shakespeare, anything you've got to have a villain in order to overcome the villain. And the villain has got to pay the price or it's not satisfying. So the Alice Cooper show is this character that goes through all this insanity. And of course they have to kill him at the end. They either have to hang Alice or they have to cut Alice's head off. And then what happens? He comes back in a white top hat and tails with a cane, and he's reborn.
Yeah.
So the whole thing is a morality play. It's from the very beginning. I didn't realize I was doing a morality play till later. And it's still a very big part of the show.
Yeah.
You know, that Alice comes back out, reborn, white top hat and tails, party time, school's out. But I think that the validity of it, the thing that was so off balance in it was people were going, how dare you do this? And how dare you do that? And this and this and this. And I went, stop. Let's say I'm going to do Macbeth. Okay. Yeah. You'd be applauding that, wouldn't you? Yeah. Okay. That's witchcraft. Romeo and Juliet's teenage suicide.
Right.
I said, any of the Shakespeare things was much darker than what I do.
Yeah.
But it would be okay if I did that. Right? Yeah. Anybody see the off balance here? You know?
Yeah.
And because it was rock and roll, it was, you know, but I mean, that did make a point that most of your classic movies or classic plays are much darker than what I do.
Yeah.
You know, at least mine has a sense of humor to it. You know,
I mean, you as a person, as a rock star, your music, you're like one of the only ones in rock that have connected the old with the new. Like, I mean, Groucho Marx and Mae West and all these old Hollywood figures are fans, you know, and all these young people that are in now, and it connects all of that. And
well, there was an interesting thing about that.
Yeah.
When I first moved to LA and when we did get big, I knew I was going to meet the Beatles and the Stones and Dylan and all these guys, and they were all great guys. The bigger they were, the nicer they were. Sinatra was great. Elvis was great. I'll tell you the Elvis story in a few minutes. Yeah, because it's really funny. And the Beatles, nicest people in the world, you know. I wanted to meet Groucho. I wanted to meet Errol Flynn. I wanted to meet the real guys that I watched in the movies all those years. So somehow Groucho came to see one of our shows. And he saw it as vaudeville. Because it really was. It was a dark vaudeville, only rock music. The rock didn't bother him at all. He was watching it and going, oh, okay. You know, he would bring Jack Benny. He would bring George Burns, Mae West, Fred Astaire. And we'd be doing the show and I'd look over on the side and I would see all these people and they're going, oh, okay. Yeah. You know, the audience is freaking out or all this stuff and these vaudevillians are totally getting it, you know. And at the end of the show, you know, George Burns would go, you know, Alice, Gracie and I used to do a thing with a guillotine and that, 1926. But those are the people I really liked. Now, Groucho and I got to be really good friends. I think he saw the absurdity in what I did. And that's why he got me in the Friars. I was the only rocker in the Friars Club. You know, he'd call me up at 2 a.m. Alice, can't sleep, come on over. And I'd say, Cheryl, I got to go over and see Groucho. Because, you know, you have to. It's Groucho. Yeah. And he'd be in bed with his beret on and a cigar, and there'd be a TV up there. And there'd be a chair here with a 6-pack of Budweiser. And we'd sit and watch movies. And then eventually he'd go to sleep. I'd put out the cigar and leave, you know. But we'd be watching the movies, and the guy on the white horse would ride up, you know, and horse would ride like that. And he said, see that guy? I went, yeah. He says, gay. And I went, and you never knew whether to believe him because he was Groucho, you know. And I went, really? And he goes, he looked at me like that, you know, like, hey, say, see the 2 nuns? Yeah, Chico and Harpo nailed them. And you know, but I mean, it was so much fun. He was sharp as a tack. This guy was 86 years old and quicker than anybody. You know, he was not in the least bit dull. So he was so much fun to be with. If you went to his house for dinner, you had to perform. After dinner, there'd be Marvin Hamlish on the piano. If you were a singer, you had to dance. If you were a comedian, you had to do something. You couldn't do what you do. You had to do something else. So it made it so absurd. Yeah. You know, but what an amazing time that was for me.
No kidding. To
be, and you'd look around and there'd be all these guys that, you know, Jack Benny. Yeah. You know, I mean, guys like that. You know, so it was really one of the best times of my life, being able to be around those guys.
So Elvis, we'll end on that. I have one last question after that.
The Elvis thing was so surreal. I get a call. Elvis is in Vegas. I happen to be in Vegas. Elvis wants to meet you. 1971, 72 maybe. I went, wow, really? So he was at the hotel. He had the whole top, you know, thing. And I show up, and it's me, Liza Minnelli, and Chubby Checker. And we get in the elevator and we go up. And they check you for guns, which was silly, because there's guns everywhere once you get up there, you know. Yeah. And when Elvis, this was not drunk Elvis, this was not high Elvis, this was Elvis, black leather Elvis. Yeah. And when he walked in the room, he was the room. You know, he like, the charisma was just, oh yeah, wow, you know. And he said, hey man, you're the cat with the snake, right? And on makeup? And I went, yeah. It's cool. I dig that, man. That's really cool. I went, wow. And he says, you're from Detroit, right? And I went, yeah. He said, come here, I want to show you something. So Elvis and I go in the kitchen, just us. Opens a drawer, hands me a loaded .38. He says, I'm going to show you how to take a gun out of somebody's hand. I'm standing there with a loaded .38 on Elvis, and I'm going, little devil goes, shoot him. And I'm going, and the little angel pops up, yeah, but don't kill him, just wound him. You know? So they both agreed I should shoot him. By that time, the gun's out of my hand. I'm on the floor. Elvis's boot is right here. And I go, that's great, Elvis. That's good. And I said, what a surreal moment that is, you know? And he says, you want to see my most prized possession? I went, yeah. So we go into the bedroom, he closed the door, and I went, wait a minute. Most prized possession. I don't know this guy that well. He opens a drawer and he pulls out an envelope. And it's a, you know, and he's sitting there and he says, what happened was, he says, we left the show that night. We go down in the parking lot and 3 drunk cowboys want to fight me. No, Elvis was a black belt. And he called his guys off and he says, he fought all 3 guys. And he says, they were x-rays. He said, I broke his collarbone right here. He says, and I broke the guy's ankle right here. And I'm going, this is your prized possession? You know? And I realized what it was. It was his only contact with the outside world. He couldn't go to a movie.
Yeah.
He couldn't go play pool. He couldn't go to a restaurant. He was so protected. He was the most recognized person in the world. Yeah. And I realized right then, I never want to be this big, where you lose your life. He was a prisoner of being Elvis Presley. And it clicked on me right then. You know, wow. I said, this is the other side of it. You know, it's probably the same thing with Michael Jackson. You know, anytime you get so big that you can't function.
Yeah.
Now, if I get any one of you and said, I'm going to give you the biggest mansion, you can have anything you want. You can have all the drugs, you can have all the food, you can have all the booze, all the girls, all the guys, whatever. But you can't leave the mansion. You'll find a way to kill yourself. You will either eat yourself to death, you'll drug yourself to death, you'll do something. It happened with Michael Jackson, it happened with Elvis Presley. You can't survive without the freedom to be able to leave all that luxury.
Yeah.
And that's the position they were in. And, you know, maybe Taylor Swift is in that position. I don't know. But you can't be in that position because you can't live. You can't live like that. And that was when I really realized the prison that Elvis was in. And when he died, I was not shocked at all. You know, I said, yeah, he ate himself to death. You know, I mean, but something was going to happen. He was either going to drug himself or something. Yeah. So it was tragic. And at the same time, I really liked him. You know, I mean, he's really a cool guy. He had no problem making fun of himself. He said, I got something wrong with my lip, man. But you know, and another time I'm in Beverly, I'm running, getting ready for a tour, and I just still run. And I saw this Stutz Bearcat drive up, and Elvis pops out of the roof. Hey, Elvis, how you doing, man? And then I just pull him back in. He couldn't even do that. So, I mean, the guy was a total prisoner of his popularity.
We're starting to see some of those memes come out of old interviews of Elvis now, you know, on Instagram and things. Where they're asking him, you know, what are your thoughts on the Vietnam War? Oh, ma'am, I'm just an entertainer. You know, that's private. You know,
that's
he's so well mannered.
Well, the colonel, you know, wouldn't let him do too much. He never played Europe because the colonel was wanted in Europe. So, and the colonel didn't have a passport.
Yeah.
So Elvis never played Europe.
Yeah.
You know.
Well, last question, Alice, man. It's been such a pleasure. I
no
want to.
Math, okay?
No math. I promise. I failed math in high school, so there will be no math. But I want to ask you, you know, looking back on your life, personal life, your career, what are you most grateful for in this moment? I think gratitude is so important. And I just ask you, what are you most grateful for?
Well, one of the things that's a constant in music and rock and roll, at least it is now, is that hard rock keeps going.
Yeah.
It goes to disco, it goes to punk, it goes to emo, it goes to grunge. Hard rock, Rolling Stones, Aerosmith, Alice Cooper, bands that play guitar-driven hard rock will never die.
Yeah.
That just keeps going. It goes in different fashions, but look at the bands that still are here.
Yeah.
They're hard rock bands.
Yep.
And of course, you know, the fact that I did come back to my Christianity, you know, and on a very good level. You know, I'm in church every Sunday. I teach Bible study sometimes on Wednesdays. And God always used the wrong people. Paul was totally the wrong person. You know, everybody that he ever used was the wrong person. So there I was in that thing. I've never had to give up the show. There were a few songs that I altered because I don't believe in those lyrics anymore. Very few of them though, because most of my lyrics were pretty much general. Yeah. You know, but the fact that my entire family are Christians, my kids, my grandkids, and none of them are stuffy. They believe, but at the same time, my daughter is an improv comedian. She could read you the phone book and you'd be laughing. You'd be dying laughing. You know, my son has got his own band, great band. My youngest daughter is a makeup artist. She does Johnny Depp's makeup, you know. And the fact that I know that they're all secure is the most important thing. Because, you know, Alice comes down about number 5 on my list of what's important. It's what I do for a job, and it's fun. I love doing it. I never get tired of the character. Alice is my favorite rock star because I talk about him in the third person all the time. I mean, this isn't Alice here. Alice is the guy on stage. And so the importance, of course, is God, your family, and then, oh yeah, by the way, I'm Alice Cooper.
I love it. That would be all-time bragging rights to say that you did Bible study with Alice Cooper.
Yeah, that would be,
for sure.
It's pretty basic stuff. But, you know, it's a coexistence, you know, that really works.
Yeah.
Yeah. I have a thing called Solid Rock Teen Centers.
Yeah.
Where any kid could come in and learn any instrument. Vocals, dance. Cheryl teaches the dance in there and the whole thing. We get about 100 kids a day. And this is like a mini Juilliard. And it's all free. Because there's so many kids on the west side of town that haven't got the money, but they got the talent.
Yeah.
And I said, well, free. It's free. So they come in there and they go, wow, this is pretty cool. And it's not just a room. I mean, these are really expensive places. You know, we have 3 of them open and they're all packed all the time. And some of these kids come out of there, wow. A couple guitar players that I would put in my band. Wow. That they didn't know one end of the guitar from the other. But, and the way it started was I watched a really awkward drug deal go down between 2 16-year-old kids on a bicycle. And I went, how does that kid not know he might be the best guitar player in town and the other kid might be the best drummer? Because they don't have any place to find out. So we opened these Solid Rock places 22 years ago, 23 years ago. And that takes a lot of my time. Because, you know, we fund it. You know, we have a big show called the Christmas Pudding, the Alice Cooper Christmas Pudding. And I can just go right through the Rolodex and go, okay, did I kiss? And they all show up. You know, everybody does 2 or 3 songs. And that pays for the whole thing. But to me, that's exactly the right way to use my name.
Yeah.
You know, to help kids out that were going to be in trouble. You know, drugs, what does it do? What's your goal in drugs? You're going to either be in jail or dead. That's it. Nobody ever gets out of that alive, you know. And you explain this to kids, and it's not some stuffy guy. It's Alice Cooper. You know, oh, you never got high. Oh, yeah, I did. Yeah. With the best of them. Jim Morrison, Jimi Hendrix, Janis. Janis, by the way, could drink anybody under the table, you know. And so I can say that with authority. One lady came in and she said, I can't send my daughter there because she's a good girl, you know. And I said, really? I said, those kids on the west side sell drugs. I said, to who? The kids on the east side with the money. Who's in more trouble? I said, they're equally in trouble. I said, so let them come in here, find their talent, and maybe it'll dissuade what's on the street. You know, we're not beating them over the head with a Bible. We're a Christian organization, but we're not a church. We're just a bunch of guys saying, let's provide this for the kids.
Well, Alice, thank you so much.
Well,
It's such
thank you.
a pleasure, and thank you for the music most of all.
Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, Alice Cooper.
Thank you.
The professor. This was recorded at Hubbard Radio, actually at Chicago's The Drive, WDRV, where Classic Rock U, where they produce the show out of. So a thank you to Classic Rock U guys, Hubbard Radio, for hosting this. And of course, Skyview Networks for putting it together as well. This was a whole lot of fun. Leave us a comment about Alice. What are your thoughts about this interview? Man, what a great guy. Let's have a great discussion below and celebrate him. Make sure to subscribe and make sure to check out Classic Rock U, where you get it. If you don't have it on your station, request it.